When you look at different drawings, you might notice a stark contrast. Some sketches lie completely flat against the paper, while others pull you in, looking as if you could reach out and pick the objects right off the page. This animation reveals the mechanics behind that difference. We start with a flat two-dimensional circle, but as we observe how light hits it and map the shadows across its surface, that flat shape takes on physical volume. It becomes a sphere. To master this, we have to understand the material environment. Take a look at these traditional Ugandan baskets. The woven plant fibers have ridges and gaps you can physically touch in the real world. This physical surface quality is called actual texture. Now examine this image of draped fabric. You can see the heavy folds and feel the smoothness of the cloth, but your hand would only feel flat paper. This is visual texture, the illusion of physical touch, created entirely by controlling light and dark. Building this level of realism requires only basic materials and careful observation. With a standard school pencil and a sharp eye, you can create depth by mastering the strategic control of hand pressure. Before we draw complex objects, we need a structured toolkit to map light. This is the 9-value scale. We establish our absolute limits first. Box 1 represents pure, untouched white paper, the brightest light. On the opposite end, box 9 requires you to press firmly with your pencil to create a dense, pitch-black shadow. By incrementally changing hand pressure, we fill the intermediate boxes from 2 through 8. This creates a smooth, perfectly stepped transition of gray values between our brightest light and our darkest shadow. When you look at a real-world object, the details can distract you from seeing these values clearly. If you squint your eyes, the distracting details blur away, forcing your brain to see only the raw patches of light and dark. Getting comfortable with this specific gradient is the absolute prerequisite for shading. You must be able to control your pencil through all 9 values before attempting to render a 3-dimensional form. Here we have a simple, smooth sphere, like a green-orange, resting on a desk. The vital first step for any drawing is establishing a defined light source, indicated here by the yellow arrow coming from the top left. The light hits the surface directly, creating the highlight, our box 1 value. Just outside of that direct light is the midtone, the natural color of the object resting in a middle gray value. Even the smoothest objects have deep shadows. As the form curves away from the light, it creates the core shadow. This is a dark, distinct crescent of value resting directly on the object itself. At the very bottom edge, light bouncing off the table back onto the sphere creates a sliver of reflected light. Finally, the object blocks the light from hitting the table, creating the deep, oval-shaped cast shadow. Let's test your observation. Pause here and predict. If the light source moves entirely to the right side of this tea mug, exactly where will the core shadow and the cast shadow fall? With the light coming from the right, the core shadow forms directly on the left edge of the mug itself, using deep values between 6 and 9. The cast shadow then stretches out across the floor to the left, mapping exactly where the mug blocks the light. This systematic mapping of the 5 light zones is the exact mechanical process that tricks the human brain into perceiving physical volume on a flat page. Translating these 5 shadow zones onto rough or patterned surfaces requires specific mark-making techniques, such as hatching or dots, to define the surface texture while maintaining the correct tones. Look at this photo. The polished clay pots require smooth, continuous shading to capture their rounded highlights. Right next to them, the broom bundles require jagged, interrupted pencil marks to capture the rough gaps and varied textures. To practice combining texture and tone, artists use a monochrome still life. This involves rendering an entire arrangement of different objects using varying tones of just one single color. In a monochrome drawing like this one, notice how the artist uses the deepest parts of the 9-value scale. Pitch black values, from boxes 7 to 9, are necessary to carve out the deep cast shadows nestled inside the rough gaps of the woven basket. This graphic consolidates the core tools from today's lesson. It shows the 9-value scale, the 5 essential shading zones, and the distinction between actual and visual texture. Feel free to screenshot this frame to use as a reference guide. By observing the physical world carefully and controlling the pressure of your pencil, you possess everything you need. You can take a blank, flat piece of paper and accurately capture the incredible richness and volume of the material environment.